Yes, thank you very much, Scott, for handing over. And you know, the thing to say actually about questions, I just want to say this at the top, is that the Q&A questions that have been lodged there, and also to those of you who submitted questions by email in advance of this morning, those questions are being captured. We'll be sharing those with the team at the Cabinet Office as well, the work for the Chancellor Duchy of Lancaster and the Border Protocol Delivery Group, and we'll aim to share responses to all of those questions back with those that have attended on the call today. So I'm just going to share my screen and then I'll move on to make a short presentation on what my impressions are, or the key kind of the critical things that you ought to be concerned with and using to prepare for the changes coming on the 1st of January. Just give me 1 second. It just takes a little moment just to fire up. But here we are. 75 days to go was the subject that we were going to cover today. And so some of the things that we've already talked about and that Michael Gofford has discussed, I will go over as well. But of course, I'm going to take a perspective of what we're hearing from the business community and if you like, a pragmatic approach to what's happening with trade negotiations, with our future trade deals, and also the actions that businesses ought to be taking in their preparations. So first thing is right at the top is the deal or no deal. So what I would say in terms of deal or no deal, just to add to what the Minister has said, is that, and he alluded to it, you know, there are no crystal balls here, but actually he said himself that he was hopeful a deal could be done. We're in a negotiation. It's, you know, it's useful to remember that this is a negotiation and that it's political. And the issues at stake, of course, are, we're hearing a lot about agreement on fisheries and access to fishing waters, and there would appear to be some willingness to compromise on the fishing waters from the EU side. Also worth noting that the UK has already come to an arrangement on fisheries with Norway. So it looks like the protection of fish stocks and will be part of that. Fishing rights will be part of any arrangement. I guess just to reflect back on what CDL said about France, France is being pretty hawkish about protecting fishing rights of French fishermen and I guess fisherwomen, but in terms of this negotiation. But remember, it's 27. It's the consensus of 27 countries that will matter in that regard. So issues at stake are certainly fish. State aid is a big issue, but it looks like, again, we're hearing murmurings from UK side that there may be compromise possibility in terms of state aid and also dispute resolution as well. Big issue clearly is the Northern Ireland Protocol. Any agreement that we reach has to be able to protect the principles of that protocol, and it's important that that, of course, happens. The peace in Northern Ireland is hugely important to not just the UK and Ireland, but also to the rest of Europe. And we see the response of the US in respect of any risk to that protocol from things like the UK Internal Market Bill. And I mentioned data there simply because the European Commission has made a ruling in terms of data that could could affect any future trade deal. But actually, the UK and the EU, we obviously move data across our borders as part of, we're in the single market right now. And so we need a deal that includes data as well as every other aspect of trade that we would want to see. The behaviours I say to watch are a blame culture. So last night we had the EU Commission saying, given their position after a meeting yesterday, that they wanted the UK to bring forward, the next steps. And so there's almost like a position whereby both sides want to ensure that they cannot be blamed for walking away from negotiations. On the one hand, that's just managing their local environments, but on the other hand, it does mean that it will keep people talking because they want to both respectively want to aim for a deal and an outcome. It certainly seems that way. We've had lots of false dawns already. We had one, and I would say yesterday, in the Prime Minister's deadline of being clear about whether a deal could happen by the 15th of October. Clearly, a deal has not happened, and we have the possibility of intensive talks happening following from the outcome of yesterday's Commission meetings, and also the Prime Minister's aim to make a statement today. Pace and frequency is another thing to watch. We should, if we're going to get a deal, we need to see an increase in pace and frequency of meetings, which has happened over the last month or so, but actually an intensifying of talks needs to come forward, and talk of compromise. So if you're seeing language around compromise, that's a good thing, and we're heading towards a deal. This thing started with politics. There's been a huge element of fear from both sides, and why the outcome of no deal would be bad for everyone. There's been lots of rhetoric, but I'm a glass half full kind of person, so I think ultimately what we deliver is delivered through pragmatism, the realization of just how bad things could be on either side if we don't reach a deal before the end of the transition period. This is just the outcome of the European Council yesterday, where there was lots of talk. Lots of talk. There are 5 points there, really, but it's really a reaffirming from the European Council about their determination to have as close a possible partnership with the United Kingdom, against the backdrop of saying, the internal market bill is a problem, and also we're going to get our member states in a state of readiness for all outcomes, including no deal. But they remain seized of the matter is at point 8 in their communique yesterday. So a real desire to continue talking and to bring forward and to do more work to get to a deal. UK response so far as before this meeting started is concerned, as David Frost's tweets last night, who criticised the EU as being no longer committed to working intensively. Interesting, followed up minutes later by the EU saying it was very keen to continue and intensify talks, and in fact Michel Barnier saying that he was ready to come to London on Monday to continue those discussions. So we wait on Boris Johnson's response today, and so that we can hear what the Cabinet is thinking and what the Prime Minister wants to do moving forward. Some fairly bullish headlines in the Financial Times, I think, today about, and the Telegraph, about what that should look like. Kind of timeline that we're looking at is today we need to hear from the Prime Minister. Is Michel Barnier going to come and intensify intensified talks from Monday? There's a real need for both sides to get into what's referred to as the tunnel, where we really get into the detail of the draft legal text, and for that to happen fairly quickly, in order that by early November, the European Parliament is in a position and has time to, and of course our own Parliament has time to progress the potential deal through its parliamentary processes, because by mid-November, really everyone's out of time, not just the political parties, but actually it's getting very out of time for businesses. And so we need that progress to happen, and to happen at pace. What's the impact of no deal? Well, WTO rules would apply in respect of the EU and for the rest of the world from a UK perspective, notwithstanding those bilateral trade deals that we have already done. Tariffs, of course, would be payable on some goods, I say, but actually most goods. There would be issues around rules of origin and a loss of cumulation, the accumulation of originating parts from the European Union and vice versa. We would have 220 million more customs declarations, the need for export health certificates and other SPS controls, and of course the loss of some continuity trade deals, of which I'll say more shortly. The impact of a UK-EU trade agreement is we would have tariff-free trade for most goods. We would have the potential for accumulation of origin on goods originating in the EU or the UK for the purposes of demonstrating origin in other trade agreements. We would still have 220 million more customs declarations. They happen regardless of whether there is deal or no deal. Export health certificates regardless of deal or no deal, because we're outside of the single market and a third country to the EU. But it would be helpful for the continuity deals that we are still trying to agree and for new trade deals to come, because for some countries, the confidence that we have an arrangement with the European Union, because they already have an arrangement with the European Union, is borne out in the UK also having a deal with the European Union. And of course, big impact would be, we would think, some parallels in terms of regulations and standards with the European community, at least in the first instance. There's a lot changing though, and this relates to the changes in our border. So we have a new UK border operating model. Version 2 was published last week and actually colours in a lot of the gaps that existed in version 1. There are still some gaps, but those gaps really relate to the whether we have a deal with the European Union or not, and some gaps relating to some systems yet to be delivered. We've also got the changes in the GBNI border, which will operate slightly differently, or differently to the border between the UK and the EU, and the addition of the Trader Support Service in Northern Ireland. And if you haven't registered for that service and you do move goods across those borders, then I urge you to do so. Not enough businesses are registering on the service on gov.uk, and that will allow you to be receiving information as it emerges on the operation of that border. We've also got, I would call, the deployment of the CDS, Customs Declaration System, by stealth on the Northern Ireland border. I say by stealth because this is a development that's been in play for quite a long time now, for a number of years, but actually was held back by the Brexit vote, the upgrading of the chief system, the existing system, to cope with the increase in declarations, and I'm sure a range of other things. But actually, we heard on the publication of the UK border operating model version 1 in July that CDS will be deployed on the GBNI border because it's Union Customs Code compliant and has to be in order to meet the requirements in that location in Northern Ireland. We've also got the GVMS system, and also something that was called Smart Freight is now renamed the Checker HGV, is ready to cross the border service. But nonetheless, those are two new systems that traders and hauliers and carriers will have to become familiar with. We've also got the introduction of additional border inspection posts, although some of those will come in on stream in March and later next year, and a £200 million port infrastructure fund that will help to fund ports on the development of new facilities for the inspection of some goods, also to deal with things like transit, consignee, consignor arrangements and the like. So a lot changing for businesses. I'm going to skip over this really. I think we've really covered what about free trade agreements, but they are really important, not just for goods, but actually they do make borders easier, they do make the movement of people easier, and they do help with the repatriation of data and of cash. In terms of those free trade agreements, where are we at right now? Some people in the Q&A have asked questions about where we're at on trade agreements. In terms of continuity agreements, of those that Liam Fox called rollover agreements, 48 have been done so far. The most recent agreement reached with Ukraine, although not all of those have been signed, but let's say that they're agreed. And that's a value of around £125 billion and 18% of UK exports. Still to be done are around £40 billion of trade with 20 countries where the EU currently has an agreement in place and represents 6% of UK exports. So countries like Canada has been mentioned in the Q&A, Singapore, and others. But we should remember also that deal to be done with the 27 EU countries represents £300 billion of exports and £372 billion of UK imports. And of course, a lot of that imported value is for component parts that are then reprocessed into finished goods and then re-exported back into the European Union. So really important in terms of value of trade that for UK businesses that we advance those trade deals and we conclude them as soon as possible. Otherwise, the implication is, of course, that for some countries where we have tariff-free trade today, we will not have tariff-free trade from the 1st of January. A list here on the slide pack that will come to you of the countries that have concluded agreements so far, and also a commentary here on that that's yet to be done. And I'm rag-rating this and suggesting that for some of these countries, like Algeria, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Ghana, Montenegro and Serbia, I think it's highly unlikely any agreement will be in place before the end of this year. Amber for countries like Mexico and Singapore in particular, and others, where my understanding is that the trade negotiations are at a progressive stage, if not sufficiently progressed to be able to have a deal in place by the year end. And then the green zone at the bottom, where we've got Vietnam and Canada, Cote d'Ivoire, Egypt, Turkey, an important market, North Macedonia, Western Balkans, where my understanding again is that things are progressing very well with those countries and we're on the cusp of reaching agreement. So I would say to you, look out, if you're trading with those countries, be looking out for announcements of agreements concluding. All these arrows represent the middle block, which is the comprehensive and progressive trade Trans-Pacific Partnership countries, where already we have in green, I'm saying 5 of those 11 countries where by the year end we may well already have bilateral trade agreements in place. Australia and New Zealand, you'll see are on the bilateral on the right. The government's talking very hopefully about a deal with Australia and New Zealand by the year end. When we talk to our colleagues in those countries, they're less confident that that will be concluded by the year end. So, but certainly by next year, negotiations are going well. But we're only entering round 2 of talks with Australia and New Zealand, whereas we're in round 4 / entering round 5 with the US. And if US is unlikely to be done by the year end, notwithstanding the election in November there, then I think it's unlikely we'll have concluded with Australia and New Zealand. So this is the work in progress list. Look towards those countries and think about where you do business with and what the implications are of not having tariff-free trade to those rollover countries on the left-hand block. In terms of trader readiness, we know from the National Audit Office work going back a couple of years ago now, they talked about traders that were EU-only traders, those that trade with EU and rest of the world, and those that are rest of the world only traders. I score this as the mostly unprepared and mostly prepared chart here. And we have got 180,000 businesses in the UK, not surprisingly, with integrated supply chains that we've developed over 30 years that trade just with the EU. And for them, they're the group of people that are mostly unprepared. In our poll, straw poll at the top of the call, we did get 61% who were saying we're somewhat prepared in our readiness. I suspect that there's still quite a lot to do in those somewhat prepared. It's a good number, 61%, but what else needs to happen to mean that you're fully prepared? That was only 10% of the group. The 73,000 EU and rest of the world traders, of course, already know how trade across borders works as a third country, and so should be more prepared in terms of their knowledge of how borders work, and just need to upgrade to the UK border, where we have full controls and how they will work. And there will be some additional processes, of course, some additional declarations to be done for that trade that they do with the EU. And then the 68,000 rest of the world traders, I would say, are mostly prepared because they mostly are dealing with sending goods cross borders and dealing with the paperwork already involved. So a big chunk of people that need to do much more in the future than they have done in the past and have to do today. What does that mean in terms of the gap? Well, there's a huge gap here. In terms of customs agents, customs brokers, those people that will help to make customs declarations happen, to help you to pull together your health certificates and the control goods and all those pieces of compliance that need to be in place to send goods either out of the country or bring goods into the country, there's a big gap of, I estimate, between 15 and 20,000. Michael Gove confirmed in Parliament back in February that the Road Haulage Association assertion of 50,000 new recruits would be needed in the next 6 months. I happen not to agree with him. I'm much more hopeful than 50,000. I think it's probably more in the range 30 to 35,000 when we add in some of the simplifications that HMRC have brought forward, some of the authorisations available but underutilised, and also some technological advances in terms of using machine learning and AI to read documents and to have people, rather than inputting data, to be scrutinising data. So I say it's in the range 30 to 35, which means that we've got 15 to 20,000 fewer intermediary staff than we need, and they have to fulfil this massive gap of 220 million more customs declarations to be done from the 1st of January. So lots to do. I'm leaving you a list here of the basic. These are the things that I'm suggesting that all businesses need to tick all of these boxes in terms of their readiness. So I'm not going to rehearse them today or go over them today. It's in the pack, but I'm going to highlight two particular areas. Number 4, will I need a duty deferment account? You will pay duty on goods moving between the UK and the EU. And you know, okay, if there is a trade deal with the European Union, some of those tariffs may disappear or may be reduced. But actually, in duty deferment, even if you're using an intermediary's duty deferment account today, HMRC are bringing forward a duty deferment arrangement that will allow you to have an account without the requirement for a cash or insurance bond to cover the future customs debt. That's a really valuable advance from HMRC, and a helpful one that's going to be very good for business cash flow. So when that new scheme opens up at the end of October, I'd urge you to consider an application. For some of you, you won't need that deferment account to be in place until the middle of next year, but nonetheless, look at having your own duty deferment account from the end of the transition period or for when you need it next year. Number 3 is postponed VAT accounting. Postponed VAT accounting existed prior to us being part of the single market, and it comes back again. And again, this is very good for cash flow. There's information on gov.uk right now on how to implement and the guidance on implementing postponed VAT accounting, but that will allow you to pay import VAT in your usual VAT return, typically each quarter, rather than at the point of import. The rest, I'm challenging you to answer those questions, to understand your business in the way that you need to understand your business before the year end. And if there are gaps in your knowledge there, or you don't understand it again, please take professional advice from people who can help you. I'm going to turn now very briefly, before we have time maybe for a couple of questions, on Chamber Customs. How can we help? We can help by providing advisory services. If you need that expert advice, we have a pool of experts to hand who can help to understand your specific needs and your specific business and the actions that you need to take. We can train people. If you choose to train, to employ your own staff to make your customs declarations yourself, then we can help by training those people to be able to do that work. We have a full programme in place for that, and HMRC, of course, helpfully have a grant scheme that will allow you to pay for that training. And we also can make customs declarations for you. As Scott said earlier, we will open up another 500,000 capacity declarations from January. Some of that's already been booked up, but we do have capacity still available to you. A summary of what we do and where we do it is there for you as well. I'm not going to go over it again. And there's also, I think people have told me, a helpful glossary of acronyms that are often talked about. So thank you for your attention. I'm going to stop there and come back to Scott, and maybe we have a few moments for some questions before we end. Sorry, Scott, you're muted.
I'd like to say it was the first time it had happened today, Liam. Many people know that's not true. Thank you, Liam, for your presentation. very enlightening, and you've addressed a number of the questions as you were going through your presentation in the Q&A function. One quick question that came through, which I think is a very practical one, from Diane Kimber, was who do we need to contact to arrange an EU EORI number?
So for an EU based, if it was France or Germany, and you want an EORI number there, then you need to apply to the customs authority in the country that you're applying to. Typically, you would need to have an establishment in that country. Now, that could be a trading establishment. You may operate some warehousing there, or it may be a non-trading establishment where you simply make returns. But remember, if you're acting as the importer in an EU state, those goods may also be subject to VAT in that state, and so you may want to put arrangements in place in order that you have some way of reclaiming that VAT. So you pay the VAT when you bring the goods into the EU. You then sell the goods on plus VAT. You need to have some kind of accounting support to be able to balance those two sums of VAT, so that you don't become liable and be in a position where you can't recover those monies.
Liam, I think a number of people asked, and you've alluded to it, but we will be sharing your presentation, won't we, with attendees?
We absolutely will. We'll also share a video content of the event, certainly the video content that I've provided, but you'll understand that we need the approval of the Cabinet Office to share the Chancellor Duchy of Lancaster's content as well. I've no reason to believe that wouldn't be forthcoming. I don't think there was anything overly controversial in the presentation. If we can, we'll share the total video. It will be available for you to go back to if you have lots of time in your hands, or just to check details. And the presentation will come to you. And we'll also send you, if you don't mind, I haven't covered the second question that we were going to ask you today on the poll. We will send you a short poll of just 2 questions, actually, and we'd be really grateful if you could take the time to complete that and send that back. It gives us an insight into your readiness, and it relates to the one of the questions relates to the 8 things that Michael Gove said businesses ought to be doing to be prepared for the end of transition.
Thank you, Liam. And I think that brings us to just over time. I do hope everybody's found it very useful today to hear from the Minister, but also those practical and pragmatic things that Liam has shared that we clearly all need to be looking at as part of the upcoming transition. Liam?
Scott, can I just mention, we've had over 100 questions from you today, which is absolutely brilliant, because, I mean, we want to try and answer your questions as far as we can, but also it really gives us terrific insight into the things that are still outstanding, the gaps in understanding that you have, and it means that I can raise those when I'm talking to Emma Churchill and her team at the BPDG, also to the teams at HMRC and at DIT and BASE. So thank you for raising those questions to those that have.
Thank you, Liam. Thanks very much for your support, and to Julia for keeping me on the straight and narrow. So all that remains to say is thanks so much, everybody, for participating. I hope you have a good rest of the day, and look forward to seeing you all soon. So take care. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.